What's going on, everyone? A few days ago, we posted up a video asking your thoughts about the emergency pickup being added to competitive, and we did get some comments out there from you guys who do watch our content. We wanted to go into those and, of course, give our thoughts on if it should be added or not. So let's take a look at our first comment here from TGC Official, who thinks that it's not going to be that useful in esports and that it has more disadvantages rather than advantages for a team. Max, what's your thoughts on that?
I mean, I do agree that it's not always going to be useful. I think that when we're looking at the emergency pickup, right, Jason, it's an item you're going to be seeing used once every blue moon, okay? It's something you're going to use in very specific scenarios when you have no other option available for you. So, like, it is going to be useful, but just very, very rarely. So, like, outside of that, it might not be, like, useful for everyone else in the lobby out there. But for that one opportunity where it works out, Jason, and it is useful, man, oh man, it can be so impactful in the game. So, like, no, just wait. Give it a chance.
I feel like if the emergency pickup was useful in a ton of situations, it would be too overpowered. It'd be too strong of an item to actually have, right? It needs to have potentially some more disadvantages, but at the same time, there are those opportunities that you have once in a blue moon when the stars align that it can become useful, and that's where the item can be extremely strong. And of course, it forces innovation, I think, out of players and teams of when to use this. Well, we have another comment coming in from Manisha. I hope I said your name correctly, though I know I probably didn't. And his opinions are separated into a couple different topics here. Right off the bat, the plane path, if you are unfamiliar with the emergency pickup, it sends you straight down towards the center of the next zone that has just recently popped. So that is one thing to keep in mind. Not to mention, it is very heavy. There's a lot of inventory space that it does take when you take it with you, if you take it with you. And of course, the last thing, it takes some time to deploy and makes you very susceptible and vulnerable to other enemies around you attacking you while you're trying to take it.
Okay, so going on to the plane path topic, mainly here, the Minister has been putting out there. It is true that the center of the circle is going to be mainly occupied. We've seen that in recent PMSLs, that a lot of teams are playing center currently. So this is the main aspect of the emergency pickup that is risky, is that you are very rarely going to use it and have a free compound unless you use it very early on in the match before teams even have time to initiate their rotation. So in that sense, he is definitely right. It is going to be something very hard to execute, but if you know how teams and the lobby reacts to certain circles and situations and scenarios in the mid to late game, it can be so impactful to give you free positions. But again, the risk is always going to be there.
And speaking of risk, I mean, Max, one thing I completely agree with in this statement is the fact that it takes up a lot of space in your bags, which means if you're going to use this and you pick, well, you have to kind of think about if you're going to take one with you, you're basically full committed to having one player who's kind of gimped in their loadout, meaning you plan to use this later on. And if you don't use it, well, that player is kind of like, well, hey, well, I could have picked up like more ammo. I could have picked up more utility, more meds. And he's kind of now set on the back foot here. However, I think one thing you and I kind of agree with, this isn't necessarily going to be an item that you want to pick up and take with you because of that reason. It's more of, oh, hey, we're in this situation. We have one in our compound. Let's see if we can use this.
Yeah, it could be interesting also if they maybe add, trunk capacity in cars. Maybe then you can put it in the trunk of your car, and that could be something that you can maybe add in the future, just trying to predict what might be happening here. But it might create, though, a new role, Jason. It might create new jobs in PUBG Mobile Esports. You got, the support player, you got the fragger, you got the IGL, and the emergency pickup holder. It's just a new role on its own, it seems. But it can be pretty impactful. And also, I do like the final point that was brought up by Manisha here, which is talking about the setup time. Look, if you're not a slow team, okay, I don't think the setup time is going to be too much of an issue. Just setting up about 30 seconds in advance and you should be fine. So I think it's a very minor issue for the emergency pickup, but definitely something you want to take into account.
I slightly disagree with that comment because it depends on where you're using it. If you use it in the very early stages of the match, there's not going to be really anyone around you. They most likely won't have any sight lines on you. But if you imagine you're in like zone 5, 6, and you have, some teams who are kind of near you or in the vicinity, if they see that come out, that could be their moment to crash on you, because if you want to take it, you have to obviously attach yourself and be there before the plane gets to you, right? So you have to be very careful about how you use it, and it might be an opportunity to either have teams attack you or bait teams into attacking you at the same time.
I was going to say exactly, what if it's a bait? What if they're trying to get you to push them? Actually, they have Doc in the compound and he has 5 nades ready to go. It's like, you got to be careful because it can be used against you. Information is a weapon, and if used correctly, you can just fake out an emergency pickup escape and they're like, oh, we're going to crash it, and then you just get completely wrecked. So you got to be careful because it might be them actually leaving or them setting up a trap for you.
Well, you got Doc with 5 nades, and of course the new role on his team that Baron's picking up, the nade carrier for Doc, who has about 20 nades to give to Doc whenever he runs out.
And we have another comment here from Shahid, who is talking about actually the scouting while using the emergency pickup. And actually, Jason, you don't get that much information while using it because, of course, you're very high up in the sky. So it is risky in that sense. But I think that there are quite a few cues that you can take, in my opinion, which is like looking at car locations around compounds, let's say. If you see a kind of weird spot, you might be like, there might be a team over there. Let's not drop there. But at the end of the day, it is a high risk, high reward item. So you might have to fight a team eventually because of you just using the item in the first place.
I mean, you have to have a downside to using something like this, right? What if you could take a nade out, prime it, and get it ready to throw, but also have your other hand where you're ready to shoot someone? Like, that's unfair, right? The downside of trying to use a nade is you don't have a weapon out. There has to be a downside when using the emergency pickup. It can't just be for free. It can't be overpowered. So it makes sense. You have no vision, but I think teams will learn how to play around that.
Yeah, otherwise just teleport, you know?
Well, here's another comment. This one coming in from Black Panther. Wakanda forever. Imagine you're stuck on the main island and the zone is a military. It's a free plane ride for you to get there, but of course the downside, if a team sees you landing from the sky, you might be shot out in midair. Now, originally when I read this, Max, I thought this meant early game, and it made no sense to me because it's like we've seen Duarte being Severny and PMSL CSA so often, and they just rotate within the blue. But as you brought up, using this towards the later stage of the game, it does have some advantages.
No, exactly. It is more of an item that can be used in the mid game here. I'm thinking more phase 4, 5, 6 potentially, where you're going to have some teams that have a portion of the circle on their side of the river, let's say, on the other side of the bridge, and they can set up the emergency pickup to avoid some bridge camping, because this is what the emergency pickup really helps you avoid, is bridge camps or teams camping strong compounds when you're trying to rotate into the circle. You can just skip all of that possibly, which is really what makes the emergency pickup viable. It adds a lot of depth. But then, Jason, you can also say, well, it adds also a lot of mind game opportunities because you can fake the emergency pickup and then the team might leave the bridge camp. So you got to be very careful how that might affect the teams that you're going up against also on the other side of the bridge. And for our final comment here coming in from Doctor, he says he would be very excited to see it being brought into PUBG Mobile Esports, which I think we agree, Jason. It would be very cool to see that item added. But he mainly brings the fact that it is an item that's cool to be used if, for example, you find the blue, you don't have cars, which is an ideal kind of situation to use the emergency pickup. But the one part of his comment that I found very interesting was the scouting of defensive teams, not the team actually using it, because it adds just almost a new dimension of you have to scout the skies, which that becomes kind of weird.
I mean, that's also a potential use for a team, right? If there's a compound they want to crash, they can use emergency pickup if they're near them, right? Then that team has to obviously look up towards the sky to also, you know, be wary of anyone dropping onto them. And guess what? You get caught looking up and the team's crashing on you with vehicles. So it could be a good way to catch you off guard. I mean, I think that the TLDR for me with emergency pickup is, I don't see it being detrimental to competitive play. It does have a niche, but I'm more importantly excited to see how creative teams can get with its use and potentially make it work for some really cool big plays.
It's going to create its own mini meta in a way. For example, you can go into compounds, even if they're occupied, but compounds where you cannot play roofs of those compounds, like you can't access them in typical gameplay. So there's going to be its own different meta for the emergency pickup. But he said at the end, it should also be rare to find in the map, which I fully agree.
Yeah.
It should not be for everyone to use, just a few in every match. And you might see it be used. And if it's used properly, you might see some of the most insane clutches in PUBG Mobile Esports ever. So I really hope it comes in the future.